for such a long time, and you get the feeling that he has much better pace in that Mercedes than Shirakawa in the Ferrari. But so far, before and after the pit stops, he just hasn't managed to make it happen. And this is, of course, the battle for the 2 remaining podium spots, with Lawrenson now 5 seconds up the road. Had Maulana gone ahead a little bit earlier on, I feel like he maybe could have put Lawrenson under a bit of pressure, especially directly after the pit stops when Lawrenson lost so much time. But ultimately, there's not enough time now for him to make any difference on the lead, but he can pick up a couple of extra points if he can get ahead of the Ferrari, which seems to be stronger at points than the Mercedes. But then other times when we join the pictures, they're locked together.
Yeah, it makes one wonder whether it's down to the cars or down to the drivers, doesn't it? Because they certainly can run nose to tail, but yet the gap on occasions has looked rather elasticated. So is that Maulana making the odd error? Is it that he gets stuck behind the Ferrari, has to drop back, let everything cool down and try again? We might find out post-race, but right now he's running out of time. He's also running out of ideas, I think, because Yuki Shirakawa has proved that he can drive a wide Ferrari, and he's hanging on to that second place.
Yeah, that Ferrari is strong where it needs to be strong. It's strong up the hill, it's strong into turn 1. Under braking, it didn't look very strong, but it had enough of an advantage going into the turn now this is, look, they're very, very close here, but coming out of the corner, the Ferrari does seem to just stretch its legs a little bit. This time the Mercedes has kind of kept close, but can't jam it down the inside of the corkscrew. He really just needs to focus on being as close as possible out of the last turn and trying to get the traction down so that into turn 1 he can then get it hard on the brakes where he definitely is better.
So let's see as they come into turn 11 then. There's a minute and 3/4 still to go. Andrew Lawrenson might squeeze an extra lap out of this at the end of the lap, but now look, finally Maulana is going to commit. Yes, to the outside line. This is the first real chance we've seen him have. He's on the outside line into turn 1. He's never going to go around the outside there. He needs to get the switchback if he can, but that is covered off by Shirakawa, and Maulana comes out of the corner a further length back. It was a good idea, but the nature of the road, the topography of the circuit is going to go against him. He needed the inside line there, look, going up to turn 4. And Shirakawa knew, Ben, exactly what was coming and got that door closed and locked and bolted plenty in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all now. It's not necessarily about the pace that these two drivers have. It is about racecraft, and Shirakawa doing a great job where he needs to. And almost Maulana just needs to really start thinking hard about how to force Shirakawa into a mistake or force him off the ultimate line, because Shirakawa doing a great job at just making sure he's fast and he's covering the line. But that was a little bit on the edge going through the corkscrew. The Ferrari bobbing up and down as though he just took a fraction too much curb and a slide through Rainey as well. He's under pressure. He's feeling it. 30 seconds remain. Andrew Lawrenson is now on his last lap.
Okay, so the race leader starts the last lap of round 2 of the GT World Challenge Asia Esports Championship presented by Tarmac Works, and it is Andrew Lawrenson who gets a hat tip for this. He's absolutely dominated the race there into the turn 1, into turn 2 hairpin. The Andretti hairpin goes for second place. Yuki Shirakawa and Dika Maulana behind as they drop now down once again into turn 3. Maulana has tried and tried and tried, and he's just going to come up short. But again, look, the Mercedes is quick. It's right there on the back of the Ferrari. He thinks about having a go, but Shirakawa's defence has been really impressive, Ben. He's not put a wheel wrong under pressure, really, for an hour.
No, but he's really struggling with the rear end of that Ferrari. You can see it moving around. He's not able to get on the power. He's not able to get away from the Mercedes, and that was why, through turn 2, the Mercedes closed in so quickly. Here's another traction area you need to be careful with. The traction control on that Ferrari probably turned down to as little as possible, and the rear end moving around. Here was where he made that little error last time. This time he covers it off, and the next opportunity is the last corner, so I think he's done enough.
So Maulana running out of corners, running out of time. It's going to be a dive up the inside if he's lucky, if he can. In the meantime, though, Andrew Lawrenson is heading for a race win for Laundry House, for Porsche. Andrew Lawrenson comes across the line to win, the Australian driver victorious at Laguna Seca. Second is Yuki Shirakawa. You've got to say he deserves that, the way that he has defended race long. Yuki Shirakawa finishing in second place, the Japanese driver. Third, Andika Maulana. And what about fourth? It's going to be Nakib Aslam. in the Lexus, seemingly 5th, Mia Rose on target to win the AM class. Brilliant for Mia Rose, that. And 6th is going to be Kin Long Lee. Terry Rayton here, Ben, pressing on for 7th place. That's a good recovery after his travails on lap 1.
Yeah, a long little queue, and in fact managed to clear Mironenko by a couple of cars in the end. This was a little battle that was going on right to the end, and Kin Long Lee holding on from Rayton, and then Bank, Thanatip and Mirenko. So a really entertaining battle for the last couple of positions. Just a few more cars to get over the line. Philippa Bakida is going to finish 4th in the AM category. Mia Rose, female racer, winning that category. Great job ahead of Terry Rayton, Mironenko. Those two were the early pitters. And then Philippa Bakida in 4th, with Ryan Houlihan taking points for 5th.
So if you go to the pro class, Andika Maulana 4th at Monza and 3rd here, the most consistent. These the provisional race results. Andrew Lawrenson ahead of Yuki Shirakawa, Andika Maulana 3rd, Nakib Aslan 4th, Mia Rose 5th, and winning the AM class ahead of Kin Long Lee in 6th place. Right then, an excellent race and plenty to keep us talking and watching all of that. Paul, I think you enjoyed it as well, because we had some great battles all the way through the field, apart from for the race lead, where Andrew Lawrenson just checked out right at the start, didn't he?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, David. Brilliant racing. Thoroughly enjoyed that. At the edge of my seat. And we had, just as we expected, a little bit of drama. Okay, Ben, maybe a lot of drama at the start of the race. But after everybody settled down, the track action was brilliant. Lawrenson, perfect performance, dominated at the front of the field. And for me, Ben Constanduros, the fight for P2, Shirakawa, as David said in the live comms, did not put a wheel wrong in that 488 GT3 Ferrari. Brilliant driving from both of those drivers, actually, for the podium positions.
Yeah, it felt to me as though Shirakawa was struggling with traction. He definitely didn't have the Ferrari underneath him like perhaps he would have done at the start of the race, and just was able to really, as I said, it wasn't down to pace by the end. It was down to racecraft, placing the car in the right place, doing the right things at the right time on track, and covering Maulana. I think, for me, had Maulana managed to pass him in the first stint, he could have challenged Lawrenson for the win, but ultimately just couldn't find a way past. And you know, that's the beauty of racing. It's sometimes, well, you don't see it in Formula One, but it's not just about flat-out lap times. It is also about racecraft as well.
Yeah, exactly. Many different permutations of things that could happen in the race, but in the end, it was Lawrenson at the head of the field that won the first race of the day today in the GT World Challenge Asia, presented by Tarmac Works. That was our pro and AM, sim racers taking part in their event, and we've still got, so stay tuned, everybody at home, the pro and AM real world drivers to take to the track for their 60-minute event. But before we get to that point, Ben, I just want to say a massive congratulations to our female racers taking part in this event. Mia Rose in a fantastic 5th position and the first of the AM drivers, and Philippa Bakida as well. Great drive, unfortunately just slipped out of the overall top 10 in 11th at the checkered flag, but both of our lady racers performing exceptionally well and providing some great entertainment out on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much focus and so much talk about female drivers across motorsport as a whole. And it's so fantastic to see them represented in sim racing. And, there's some very, very good female races over in Australia across the different platforms. Emily Jones, for instance, does the V8 Supercar Series esports events. And it's fantastic to have a big, solid group of female racers coming across from Australia. And hopefully they can fly the flag not only in the Asian races that we've got on the world scene. Mia, that is incredibly good. Yes, she won the AMS, but actually what impresses me most is her performance across the whole field, across the overall result, and beating so many pro drivers.
Yeah, absolutely right. And once again, we saw strategy play a part. Again, I believe yourself and David spoke about it during the broadcast, where Bakida held on much, much later into the race than some of the other drivers. I was fascinated to see how Terry Rayton, who got involved in that early incident in the race and then came down pit road a little bit earlier than maybe some of his rivals, to see how he worked his way through the traffic and how such a variance of strategy plays out over the course of a 60-minute race. Do you stop early? Do you try and work your way through the field? Or do you hang on and risk those tyres falling off? And again, Ben, we've seen very different strategic decisions made by the drivers. And we're now on our third race, our second event, our third race of the season proper. Have you got a feeling as to what is the optimal strategy for a driver to take in these sort of scenarios?
Well, as you well know, Paul, you're more of an expert in ACC than I am. There is not the ultimate strategy for the race format that we have. There are different strategies for the different tracks, the different weather conditions, and the different cars. And obviously, we raced, I don't think we've mentioned it, but we raced early morning in Laguna Seca. Temperatures were kind, and therefore there was never going to be a need to change tyres. Yes, the tyres were not ultimately operating at their ultimate throughout the whole race, but they lasted. There was no massive drop-off. As we get through the rest of the season, depending on the track temperature, depending on the conditions that we experience, and depending on the tracks we go to, because of course that fifth round we don't even know where we're going yet, then we'll see perhaps the need to change tyres or the strategic option to change tyres. But today it was never a need. It was just tick that box of going into the pits. And of course, because of that big first lap accident, so many people running with damage, getting into the pits early was a very, very important thing to do for, I think, 15 cars in that first lap?
Yeah, very, very popular was pit lane at the start of the race. And I just want to take you back to the start of that race again for a moment, if I can. We saw a significant number of cars involved in accidents. They're making contact, some people facing the wrong direction. And these are all reasonably experienced racers. They've put in a lot of time, a lot of practice. Why do we see these sorts of contacts on an opening lap? Is it over-exuberance from the drivers? Is it the inability to be able to see clearly around you compared to the real world? Why is that?
Didn't see a replay of exactly what happened to De Very easy going into turn one, of course, with cold tyres to slightly outbrake yourself effectively, and the rear end just not sticking and so are rotating. That was one possibility. The other possibility, of course, with however many 40 that we had going into turn one, that there was inevitably going to be a little bit of contact, and it's the lightest of contact, as you well know, that turns these cars around. So as soon as he was parked in the middle of between turns 1 and 2 there was nowhere for anybody else to go. So many barreling into the side of him, and so many also avoiding action. We were lucky actually to have only 1 or 2 that fully retired out of the race. We could have had so many more.
But once things did settle down, the drivers got into their rhythm and people started to find a feel and a vibe of the car and the track and the conditions and their rivals, we saw some incredible racing. You'll have to excuse that I've forgotten the name of the drivers now, but towards the end of that race, we almost had 3 wide into the corkscrew, which is something you very rarely see successfully achieved. And the skill that these drivers are showing out on the circuit to race in such close proximity to each other, passing, trading paint, bumping door to door. It's phenomenal to see, isn't it? Especially with it being the Asia region as well, which is the first time really they've had such a high profile championship like this.
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting that Laguna provides so much great action, because the layout itself on a piece of paper doesn't look that particularly special, but because it's so kind of medium to high speed, it's really hard to get every apex and every corner bang on every lap. And so even our sim world drivers struggle with Laguna Seca. I'm so excited / apprehensive to see how we get on with our real world drivers coming up in a few moments.
Yeah, that's right. And while we speak of real-world drivers, let's have a look at the entry list of who is going to be taking part in this second race. There are names many people will recognise from the last round and also from real-world racing. There's pro and amateur drivers. We've got there Matthew Marsh, Alex Young with Formula One experience as well. Of course, we've seen these drivers are adapting to the world of virtual motorsport. Darryl O'Young there, you see this driving in the World Touring Car Championship and an array of GT racing series as well. But this is a new thing for them. This is driving in a virtual space. We've already talked about how technical and challenging and short the Laguna Seca racetrack is. And when you've got 45 GT3 specification cars on track with drivers with varying levels of experience in this kind of environment, as you say, Ben, it's exciting, but at the same time a little bit nerve-wracking as well. And compared to our sim drivers that we've just watched, do you think the real world pros are going to affect a different strategy than their sim experienced counterparts, or is it just a case of tackle whatever's in front of you and see how it goes?
No, what we do know is there's so much more of a marriage now between the real world teams and the sim teams. And so I'm sure that even the guys that we've just seen racing will be helping out our real world drivers. The teams such as Laundry House, the teams such as Craft Bamboo, Tarmac Motorsports, they'll be helping each other out, and they'll be spotting and they'll be deciding on strategy. But so I expect the driving to be a little bit different, but in terms of strategy, I think they'll have it nailed, and there'll be a lot of help coming from both sides, because it's lovely over the course of this year to see how the real world of motorsport has embraced the sim racing world, and how they've been helping each other throughout the whole of our lockdown period at the start of the year, and now as the real world starts to open up again.
I think that is a tremendous point there, Ben. Virtual motor racing, sim racing, esport, call it whatever you will at home, is continuing to grow in number, grow in strength. We've got 45 cars lining up on the grid with real world drivers taking part in this championship. It's fantastic to see, and I'm thoroughly excited to see how it goes. And actually, speaking of which, let's have a look at the starting grid for this next race in the GT World Challenge Asia Esports Series, presented by Tarmac Works and the Real World Drivers. So the starting grid, as you can see, again, Ben, we've got a lovely mix of manufacturers involved in this one, just going to show that no one car is the standout performance so far.
No, and I think more of these drivers will have brand partnerships in the real world that they'll want to replicate in the virtual world. So we'll see more people having to choose certain cars. But ultimately, again, it's credit to the guys that are putting the whole competition together, that all of these cars here around this track seemingly are competitive. It's not like we saw perhaps in Asia, where the McLaren was the better car to have at one track, the Mercedes was the better car to have at another track. It is very much open. Mercedes still look good because we've got a good few cars at the head of the field there, including Borg, who's taken pole position.
And interestingly, Paddy, you'll have noticed, lines up in 9th place on the grid. So he's on the 5th row of the grid. And he was a winner last time out. So he's a driver that absolutely needs to work his way through the field. We've seen already that 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th position down is the danger zone for that T1. And Paddy, what will he do in this race, do you think, Ben? Is it going to be a case of attack and try and make positions as early as possible? Or is he going to be looking into Andretti and into Sector 1 at least to try and stay out of trouble? Because as you mentioned in the comms, you have an accident, you acquire some damage on your car, that's a significant amount of time down pit road, and it's very, very easy to drop a lap in the very early stages, and that's your weekend out of the water straight away.
I think there'll be drivers that will be running with damage in this race. I really don't think that there'll be very few that will be clean. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be so difficult to nail a clean race. And yeah, ultimately, I think keeping out of trouble for somebody like Paddy is going to be so crucial. David said it before in the other race. We need to score points in every single one of these races, even if it is the tail end of the top 10 in one race and the top step on another race, because there is so much chaos in all of these races. Staying out of trouble, keeping clean is probably the more key than trying to knock in and bang in the qualifying laps across the 1 hour.
Yeah, and of course, it's like everything. It's like Andy Priaulx made famous in World Touring Cars. Consistency, points, scoring is what matters in a championship situation. And to clarify to everybody at home, by the way, first and foremost, folks at home, thank you so much for joining us in this broadcast. It's great to have you with us. Do leave a comment in the chat of the race broadcast. It'd be great to hear from you all. We've seen the pro and the AM sim racing drivers. We have got another 60-minute race upcoming, but this time it's the real world drivers taking it to the virtual track. 60 minutes. There is a pit stop. We are the SRO GT World Challenge Esport Asia Series presented by Tarmac Works. We are delighted to be in the Asia region for this championship, and we're going to go to the track and have a look at the real world drivers in action for this, their second race of the GT World Challenge Asia Championship powered by Tarmac Works.
Paul, thanks very much. We are set then to go racing in the real entry. Now, the drivers getting themselves set for another hour with the mandatory pit stop. There's no window to it. You do it when you want, either early, get it out of the way, or if you're in traffic, bail, try and buy yourself some clear track space. We saw in the sim race that lots of drivers were doing it some drivers were doing it towards the very end, which might not be ideal, but we'll see how people treat this. The man on pole position is Aaron Borg. He lines up then in number 4, starting the SRT Team Sydney Mercedes from pole with alongside Evan Chen, who won his class in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo World Finals last year. The second row, the Angs, Freddie, number 98, and alongside is Dominic Ang. Row 3, Matt Solomon, lining up number 36 with his Mercedes. Melvin Moe alongside another of the Mercedes for Craft Bamboo Racing, ahead of Tenku Lei in number 213. His BMW alongside Antares Al, the Modena Motorsports Porsche, as you look there at number 3, Dominic Ang going through. The very excitingly coloured Viper racing car, the Malaysian, carrying on with the grid, as Paul mentioned, the championship leader of the race, one winner from the Devonshire Padiachi, a long way back on this grid. Starts 9th on the 5th row alongside Alex Al. Then you've got James Russell and Kevin Say, with Matthew Marsh on the grid alongside Alistair Young, Kang Ling and Adam Lee Fong, both experienced on the 3 racers. Now GT racers share the next row ahead of late entry Aaron Lim and Sean Tong alongside of him.
Plenty of action as the drivers try and warm up their tyres and get as much temperature into everything as possible. I've seen actually from 8th position, Al has had a spin on this warm-up lap, so not necessarily what you want to be doing before the start of the race. He'll try and get himself back into track position. Remember, at the start of this race, the drivers are given boxes in which they need to stay in. They see those virtually on their screens. If they exceed those boxes, whether it be behind or in front, then they automatically get a drive-through penalty. So look out for, on the timing screens on the left-hand side, a little red dot saying DT, and that will signify if they have done something wrong at the start of this race. The front few rows of the grid lining up very, very early. They're still going to get round that last corner, and they are being very well behaved.
So we've got the cars.
Unlike our sim guys that only just about got themselves sorted at the line. Right then, cars coming to the line. Dominic Ang in 4th position. Aaron Borg, Evan Chen, Freddie Ang on the front 3 rows, and off we go. And it's the braking zone down into turn 1, which is the crucial, and the Mercedes already with a slight advantage into there. Oh, but he gets biffed. He gets biffed by the Porsche. Was that Evan Chen that turned him around? And luckily, he's off the track this time. Such was the biff that most people can get past without causing issue. But on the exit, there's a couple more flying off into the barriers as well, David.
Yeah, one of them, I think, was Dominic Ang in the Porsche from the second row that headbutted the spinning cars. So, yes, it's all kicked off right from the very start, hasn't it, as we rather feared. Not quite as bad as the sim race, but bad enough for those that had qualified well. So, strangely, being at the pointy end of the grid wasn't an advantage to be able to drive away from the traffic. Far from it. It's people at the front getting themselves in strife, spinning, and then being the roadblock for the traffic behind. There was one car I noticed, Ben, that didn't even get into the race. Looked like there was a Porsche in the pit lane at the very start. One limping on there as number 7, Melvin Moe, climbs the hill. Works another spin. Who was that going around? There is mayhem on this, the opening lap, all the way around the lap as Evan Chen leads the way, but there might be a little bit of an investigation into exactly what kicked off at the first corner and how that might ultimately shape the outcome of the race and the result thereafter.
Yeah, we did have a couple of drive-through penalties handed out in race 1 by our race direction team, so it's very possible to have that in this race as well, considering that Evan Chen has now a healthy advantage in a Laundry House liveried Porsche. Deja vu from the last race we had, but ultimately he's going to be carrying some damage for sure, and he's going to be carrying the guilt of pummeling the Mercedes into the first corner. Had a good start, but I think for me, Borg just hung on the brakes just a little bit too much into turn 1, slowed the car too much to hold the inside line. The idea was to cover the inside and make sure nobody threw themselves up the inside, but ultimately it meant that Chen was, all locked up and straight into the tail.
Yeah, the other thing that Evan Chen is going to carry, I would think, is this Damocletian investigation, surely, that will come to see whether he has a case to answer in that first corner, and it could well be that Mr. and Mrs. Drive get together with Mr. and Mrs. Through and end up, well, in fact, it's going to be a stop-go. Two different families, the stops and the goes have merged. So a stop-go 10-second penalty going Evan Chen's way for his part in that first corner drama. So now we're looking really at Matt Solomon ahead of James Russell, with Matthew Marsh going great guns in 4th place as they come out of the corkscrew up towards the completion of lap number 2. So Matthew Marsh there, gaining ground all the time. The 52-year-old who says that sim racing is for the teenagers. Matthew adapting really nicely. He's about to get into 3rd place once Chen serves his stop-go.
Yeah, I think we've got plenty of more gentlemanly drivers in this one, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. There was one car that I don't think started, which looked like a Porsche stranded in the pits. But Ben, you might be able to unravel exactly who we've lost from all that carnage at the very start here.
Well, unfortunately, it was Nan Ling who was in the pits before the start of the race. Frank Yu doesn't look like he started, and neither did Adley Fong, which is a huge disappointment for one of the more well-known racers around the world. Adley, A1GP, I think, was the first time I came across Adley Fong. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like he even went out onto the track. Dominic Ang caught up in the accident at the start. He is back out on track, having pitted on lap 1 with Douglas Koo, Leona Chin, the female racer in this one, and then Aaron Borg also in pits. But I feel like that may be a pit stop that is a retirement.
Right, he was the man on pole, of course, wasn't he, Aaron Borg? As you say, he got biffed in the first corner and got turned around. So I was slightly fearful that we were going to have dramas again, and so it has proved to be. But whether Borg can rally looks rather doubtful now, seeing that he's in the pits and it's a long stop. But Evan Chen is going to have to serve this stop and go. Now, can you combine a stop and go, in other words, a penalty pit stop, with your regulation stop, Ben?
Yes. Oh, no, stop and go you can't.
No, so he's got to make 2 pit stops, is what I'm heading towards.
I refer to the guys at Race Control, and they will inform us as to whether that's possible or not. But it doesn't seem right. If it's a stop and go, it feels like that has to be a whole separate trip into pit lane, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would agree, and that's kind of behind my question, really, that he's got to make 2 pit stops, which will in turn drop him a long way down. What we're not seeing in the leading 23 or so at the moment is anybody actually doing their regulation stop early. So the top 23 all staying out on track, nobody bailing to get out of the way. We have got battles going on, which include here, look, number 10, which is Alistair Young, and 63 being given a bit of a work over. That is Heng Min with the Toro Racing Mercedes, and he drops back. So Alistair Young in the Lexus there booms past on the inside line. Chen leading by 4 seconds, trying to make good his escape. He needs as big a gap as he can build, doesn't he, for when he has to serve that stop-go penalty.
Alistair Young, the son of Alex Young, one-time Formula 1 driver, and we saw him actually, the two of them, getting in a bit of rallycross and a bit of bumper cars, the two of them there. We saw them actually as quite early adopters to the SRO series. I feel like we saw them racing in the original Charity Cup at Monza for Europe, in fact, as Evan Chen now dives into the pits. So Alistair Young with plenty of months of experience, as has Alex, but at the moment fighting in the team. Oh no, actually up to 6th now, so that's not too bad.
Yeah, indeed. So Evan Chen, as you say, now pits. The other dark horse in this is becoming the number 45 Mercedes, as a bid is made there. Look, Ling goes up the inside. Kang Ling gains a place, just moves himself up past the Porsche. But as Billy Lowe drops back, so Dervish Padiachi is in third place, and he's breathing down the neck of Matthew Marsh for second. So can Dervish Padiachi make it 2 in a row? At the moment, the pace would suggest that he is going to be able to chip away and go after the Porsche in second spot, maybe then after the race leader.
A reminder of our championship positions coming into this race. Seems a bit crazy at the moment. Padiachi won race 1 with Yang Thong Lang in second. Where is he right now? He's down in 16th spot. Sean Thong, third last time out. 5th spot at the moment. Adley Thong, 4th. A DNS for Adley in this particular race. And then Aaron Borg, who had the pole position, he finished 5th position in Monza, and it's going to be a tall order for him to pick up any decent points after being extracted from the lead of the race at turn 1. So a real different, as I expected, a real different order that we have here to what we saw last time out, and some real send-it moves going on around the lap right now.
And just to confirm, a stop-go does not count as one of your regulation pit stop. So you'll have to do 2 if you are Evan Chen. So he's got the stop go out of the way, but then he has to come back in to serve the regulation stop. As there, now up into 15th place is Jiatong Liang, as Ben rightly says, second in the championship after the Monza race. He's coming under attack from the number 50 Ferrari of Hideto Yasuoka in the Ferrari, the Japanese driver, again from that pro class. Melvin Moe doing a reasonable job in full spot at the moment, keeping Sean Tong and Alex Young behind him. But the race leader then, after Evan Chen having been forced to make that pit stop, trying to make good his escape on the road at the moment, as down Matt Solomon will come from the corkscrew. There is Division Padiachi all over the back of Matthew Marsh. So Matthew, who's done lots of racing in his time, as well as being a journalist and broadcaster, keeping Padiachi at bay. Matthew, from memory, had a win at the British Grand Prix one year in the Trofeo Maserati, the red-flagged race, and his car hadn't actually made a pit stop, so he was in the lead when the red flag came out. There was no provision to penalise those that hadn't stopped, so he and Vicky Butler-Henderson took a race win, which was quite a moment. But Matthew here is second. Matt Solomon trying to build the lead on track, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, and not a name. Oh yes, he finished with 1 point to his name after the first race in Monza.
Yeah, so Matt Solomon.
So didn't get. Yeah,
sorry, Ben, you broke up for a moment. Yeah, Matt Solomon never really shone, did he? As you say at Monza, he was never really in the mix, but going much better here. There through is in 5.79 Alex Au, who's quite an experienced real-world racer from Carrera Cup and from Ferrari Challenge, as well as the GT Series Asia, and he comes then only in 16th place on the tail of Yasuoka. So you've got Ferrari versus Lamborghini in this kind of Auto Italia battle that's raging on right now.
Plenty of time still remaining though, 50 minutes, and in these kind of races, you've got to also factor in the mistakes that the drivers will be making lap after lap, not necessarily adopted so comfortably to the world of sim racing from the real world, and trying to bring in real world traits into the sim world sometimes doesn't pay dividends. So there is, whilst the order looks calm at the moment, the pace isn't actually too bad. They're only lapping, the front runners are only lapping around a second slower than what we saw in the earlier race. So really, remember when we were started the Asia series, the Europe series as a two cars off in the barrier there, and heading straight to the pits. When we saw the European season start, there was about a 5-second deficit between the two categories, but these guys are much closer to each other.
Absolutely. One of those, I think, that was in strife now going for the pits was Yasuoka. Melvin Moe, incidentally, running in 4th place. He has now copped a drive-through penalty for an incident on the opening lap of the race with 213. Tenku Lei, in the BMW, who came into this race being 6th in the championship. So it's heading into being one of those races where if you keep out of trouble, you're liable to get a half-decent result, aren't you? There are lots of people in strife and now being given penalties.
I spoke a little bit to Matthew Marsh after the first race in Monza, and he was explaining to me that he had an issue with his screens at the start of the race and was struggling with frame rate. So you basically want as many frames per second as you can possibly get to have a smooth frame rate and therefore be able to see where you are turning in. That the the less frame rate you have, anything below 60, the car and the inputs don't quite match, and it starts to feel a bit kind of stuttery. So he was fiddling with the frame rate, fiddling with various settings to turn things off to try and increase the frame rate, and ultimately turned his mirrors off as we have more contact at the last turn there, and Taro Zhao now picks up a little bit of damage on his car. And by turning off the mirrors, he'd also had an issue with his screen. So even before the start of the race, he was incredibly stressed, and he was driving by marker boards by the end, braking when he counted to 0 on the marker boards rather than a feel for where he needed to be. Such was the frame rate issue.
And I thought frame rate was how much it costs to hire a Zimmer. We've got more cars off in the background, so there's another Mercedes that's gone rally crossing. It's starting to get a bit more touring car-ish than GT-ish, this, isn't it? There's a lot more leaning going on. 33 Porsche on Taro Zhao, we saw getting roughed up. He's down in 12th. Evan Chen, now, have a look at this. He's 13th after his stop and go, but of course he's still got to serve another penalty. But interesting here, Ben, his pace looks pretty good. He's charging along. He's trying to close up onto the traffic, as you see Division Padayachi going down the hill. And now we've got him shown as being in 4th place. So has he dropped back on this lap? What's going on? Because the Mercedes was 3rd at the start of the lap. Yes, now he's back up into 3rd on that graphic. So Division Padayachi was on the tail of Matthew Marsh, but he's lost a lot of time somewhere by the look of it.
I get the feeling that was a slow lap. We'll get confirmation from the timing screen in just a second. He had dropped, I think, behind Melvin Moe, but Melvin, with a penalty to serve and a drive-through, he's now into the pits and doing that. Exactly the same, I think, as what happened in Monza. I have a feeling that Moe was right at the sharp end of the field, but had to serve a penalty. So Melvin will take 2 trips to pit lane in this race. The good thing is, such chaos across the 1 hour race is, even 2 pit stops, you still, if you've got the pace, might be able to snatch a point or 2. Such is the chaos of the race. Matt Solomon leads, Matthew Marsh second, Division Padiachi third. Was about right. That was where I think he was 5th for most of the race in Monza, and ended up kind of inheriting the victory with so much chaos going on in front of him.
And of course, we're also talking about the overall situation, but there are points for the top 10 in each class. So you might be in the case, for example, of Antare Zhao down in 9th place, but you're scoring better than that within your class. There is number 10, which is Alistair Young, the Axel Sports Lexus, and he is under big pressure, isn't he? Because 98 Honda is there. Freddie Ang, the Arrows racing car, right up behind him. So great little battle this. Good to see 2 different brands going so well. Different types of car as well, because you've got the big, grunty Lexus versus the rather more aero-friendly, the rather more svelte shape of the Honda, that they come up over the timing line. Further proof of the variety that we have and how the Assetto Corsa BOP works. We had 9 manufacturers in the top 11 out of the sim race. Not bad at all, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that this Honda is running, because we do see so many of these ACC races where people don't choose the Honda. It's not something that particularly runs well in the form that it is simulated on this particular platform. So it's great to see it. I love it as a car. If it was fast, it would be my choice of car for sure. And we only get to see 1 or 2 in the real world in the Intercontinental GT Series. I think it was both in Indianapolis and at Spa last time out. But there's only one really, I think, that runs, isn't there?
That's right, the Yas Motorsport car in Intercontinental GT, not GT World Challenge Europe. It was at Spa, as you say, because of Intercontinental points. But they are great-looking cars. We just need a few more of them to catch on. Rick Yoon here, another experienced real-world driver. He's an AM, and he is under attack, is he not now? Because as the cars swing through there, you can see Billy Kai-Fung Lo, Billy Lowe with the Audi Sport Asia TSRT entry. The Macanese driver right up behind him as they sweep through the infield of the circuit. So Billy Lowe is another AM. This is 16th overall, but significantly, Ben, it's a battle for class position and class points, isn't it?
It is. I've just managed to pick up on a drive-through penalty for Aaron Borg. Now, he's been given a drive-through penalty for causing a collision with Leona Chin on lap 1 at turn 3. So having been punted out of the lead at turn 1, he obviously came back onto the track and then caused further accidents. So that's a bit of a shame for Aaron Borg, who, despite going into the pits early on and being removed from the track, I had high hopes for at least picking up a couple of points, and unfortunately now with a second visit, that will be more harder, in fact.
Yes, and lots of other people find themselves in bothers further up the road. The late entry to the race, number 2, Aaron Lim, doesn't appear on the entry list, but he did get into the race, started sort of at the front of midfield, if you like, but he also got caught up in the first corner drama, so he's another one a long way back, trying to make up some progress. Matt Solomon's lead gap, though, for my money, is coming down. Matthew Marsh, 2 seconds adrift now. He's getting a little bit closer as we look at Melvin Moe in number 7 on the attack, gets up the inside there to try and find a way past the Porsche 33 of Antares. He does so, but then he runs way out wide over the curb, but does hang on to the place.
I fear Matthew Marsh may have made a mistake. My timing screens are suggesting that he's lost a bundle of time on this last lap. And indeed, as you can see on the left-hand side, Padiachi inherits 2nd, Thong up to 3rd, Young 4th, Ang 5th. Where's Marsh? Is he out? Is he completely out of this race? No, he comes across the line in 7th spot.
And as you were saying that, we had a yellow flag graphic at the top of the screen, which was there for all the amount of time you were telling us how many places he was losing. So yellow flag, Matthew Marsh, are they connected? Well, we might be doing him a disservice, but Matthew Marsh bogged down now in 7th place, seemingly, after a moment. And there he is, number 17, going through. He's fallen back behind Kang Ling. Now, remember at Monza, Ling was very, very quick until, did he have a penalty late race? But here, again, he's underlining the performance that he's got from the Lamborghini, having been in the European Championship at the start of the year in a Mercedes.
Yeah, Matthew Marsh lost 13 seconds on that last lap. It was right at the end of the lap, so I presume a corkscrew issue for him. He wasn't trying to open a bottle of wine. Here is the corkscrew. I think it's the first pun I've ever done, David. You must be...
Welcome. There's another Porsche going off the road there. Now, he's got back onto the track in the background. This is Kang Ling's view as he drops towards the end of the lap. Pit in on the left-hand side. Whoops! Has to work very hard, but he's off the road, Ben.
Oh dear, just lost the rear end under braking into that very hard braking left-hander, and manages to keep the car facing the right direction. Look at the numbers at the top of his dashboard there. Traction control on 3, ABS on 1. So he really is running this car as a pro driver would, with very little aid at all. If I'm running in this particular platform, I've got all of that turned up to the maximum just to help me keep the car on the road. But with ABS down at the small numbers, I fear as though perhaps a little lock-up going into that final turn, it was enough to take him off the road.
Indeed so. It cost him a place as well, didn't it? So Matthew Marsh back into the top 6. The AM leader, incidentally, is Kevin Say. Now, he won the AM class at Monza. He's leading it here. Whisper it, after what we've seen today. We haven't seen much of it, but this is like consistency, isn't it? Somebody leading their Class 2 races in a row. Devotion Padiachi, 2nd place, Ben, but he's got to make up 5.7 seconds, which is quite a big deficit. And also, just looking at the graphic, his internet connection is not the strongest.
Yeah, that's okay right now. That's when you go above about half, when it starts to get really worrying. Andrew O'Hara demonstrating in the first race exactly what we mean by internet connection. When it goes red, then you're in grave danger of being booted, and I think that's actually how he ended up retiring out the race. Alistair Young with a slow lap that last time through, 1.5 seconds slower than he managed the lap before, so maybe not necessarily a mistake, but just perhaps being caught. Actually, no, he's 2.6 seconds back off Thong now, so there was a little issue there. And actually, look, Freddie Yang is now right on his tail.
Absolutely right. Freddie Ang going really well in the Arrows Racing Honda. Whoops, that I think was number 3, Dominic Ang, getting it not just out of the way, but way out of the way, terrorised into submission. But Freddie Ang is on his toes, certainly, as he is onto the back once more of Alistair Young. So he's closer than ever before, short of going over the top of him. He's going to have to think of something pretty courageous here. He pulls out, has a look as they get on the run now towards the corkscrew as they come along the Rahal Straight, and he goes one side and then the other, but everywhere he wants to go, that Lexus has ticked off the move, again shoves his nose up the inside heading to the corkscrew. It's going to be a very sore nose, that, if he's not careful, because that Lexus is a big car and it's well driven by Alistair Young at the moment, and he's defending stoutly.
Yeah, I think exactly what we described in race 1. Alistair Young somewhere perhaps has had a slide or has just pushed his tyres too much, and he is losing chunks and chunks of time over the pace that he is able to do. Either that or he's had contact somewhere and now is running a slightly limp Lexus to what it should really be, because again, a very slow lap come the end of that lap, and both him and Freddie Yang really delayed.
So through the hairpin comes Ang. They are 4th and 5th. 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds back on Sean Tong. The leading gap is 4.1. Padiachi to Tong, a 2.5 seconds. Now don't forget Sean Tong, 3rd at Monza, 3rd here. Division Padiachi was the winner there, 2nd here. This is Ang making his move, and he's done it. Good car speed. Dives up on the inside as they head now into turn 5, and he worked hard for that, and he deserved to get through there because he's put a lot of effort into the race thus far.
Again, Alistair Young struggling with grip through the mid-speed corners. That second right-hander around the back of the lap is almost flat out, and I think Alistair Young just losing the rear end a little bit, having to get out the throttle. The Honda was good. Oh, he's too deep into the corkscrew there. And now, will he get a slowdown? Will he get any kind of penalty for that? No, the game decides that he didn't gain an advantage by skipping across the track, but traffic might allow Alistair Young back up the inside, carries more momentum, and may think about going down on the inside. No, it's okay for the moment, but it was a small error from Alistair Young rather than Freddie Yang kind of ultimately having the better pace, although I do feel, though, he should be able to stretch that advantage now in 4th position if he can get his head down and not be distracted by back markers.
Okay, so 4 seconds to make up then to
he's
Sean
done it.
Tong. Yeah, back up the inside comes Young. He's got the drag out of the corner, hasn't he? But Ben, he's on the outside now.
He's trying to go round the outside. This is a much harder place to do it, and a little bit of elbowing from Freddie Yang to keep him at bay. And now, really, the next 2 corners are not places where you can run side by side or try and overtake. Not really braking zones. Perhaps going into the left-hander. We saw it in the pro race a couple of times. People jamming out the inside there, but it hasn't happened. And now Alistair Young needs to kind of settle down, try and get those tyres back into working order. But yeah, I think when Alistair has a good lap, he's got the pace to run ahead of Freddie Yang, but too many errors are running into his laps, and Freddie Yang being caught out a couple of times, just running a little bit deep here last time and also into turn 1.
Well, this time he's got it right, and hopefully if he can stretch that margin now over Alistair Young, the pressure won't be quite so bad and he can make fewer enforced errors. The gap has just crept up a little bit. Behind them, remember, in 6th is Matthew Marsh. It's Kang Ling 7th. A class-leading 8th is Kevin Say. 9th is Melvin Moe after his earlier penalty. And 10th is the Antares Au Porsche, ahead of Alex Au in 11th in his Lamborghini. Over the timing line goes Freddie Ang, half a second up on Alistair Young as they battle their way through the traffic. The lead gap's coming down again, isn't it? Matt Solomon doing a decent job actually here, but he's 3 seconds ahead, and I just wonder whether Padiachi is going to be able to bring that gap down by much now.
Now, we were saying that the pace, ultimate pace of these guys wasn't far off the sim guys that we saw in the last race. And indeed, best lap from Matt Solomon, a 23.1, plays a 21.9, 21.8 that we saw in our sim pro race. But the consistency from these guys is what's key. Last lap for Matt Solomon, a 24.8. So he's way off what he can do. And Padiachi, therefore, taking a second in that last lap alone because of the pace of the Australian behind. So Matt Solomon just, maybe again, traffic. We've got so much more traffic in this race, seemingly, than we saw in the previous race because of the difference in kind of experience from all of our drivers, I guess. But Matt Solomon, again, having to be really careful in the braking zone into the last turn, not to go down the inside unnecessarily and then get himself caught in a silly accident, especially leading the race. And as we spoke about, keeping out of trouble is probably the biggest key of all.
Absolutely so. Well, there he is, the Hong Kong driver, born to an Australian dad and a Chinese mum, but he has the Hong Kong licence as well as an Aussie passport. We've seen him in Europe in Formula 3, Matt Solomon, but has raced a lot in China. Good battles going on here as Kang Ling tries to get up through the traffic. Also, the battle between the Owls rages on. Alex Au on the back of Antares Au. So it's the Porsche ahead of the Lamborghini. This is for 10th place. Look as they climb the rise, heading up towards the Andretti hairpin. Alex Au will dive to the inside line. but he's not near enough. Antares now goes a bit deep into the corner, however. Is that going to let the Lamborghini challenge coming out the other side? The answer is no. And then behind them, look, you've got James Russell, who is on the charge once more. He has dropped back a little bit from his grid position, but that's the other Honda in the race starting to play catch-up now.
Yeah, that's a really interesting corner, that first turn, because you can do exactly what the Porsche did. Go a little bit deep into the first time. Now the Lamborghini has the space, and Alex Al does make that move stick, and now has to keep the momentum all the way up the hill, do a little bit of defence, which is going to allow James Russell to come and play as well. Holds the inside line there. That's going to compromise his speed really up the hill, and here comes James Russell to take another position from Antares Al. He's got the inside line in the corkscrew, and in fact is ahead even before they get to the braking zone.
And you might remember a few laps back as well, we had a couple of cars off coming towards turn 11, bailing for the pits, one of them being the white Ferrari, number 50 of Hideto Yasuoka. Well, he has also now copped a drive through for causing a collision with Aaron Borg. So Borg has got a penalty himself, and then he has been the victim of more dramas. So it's all going on as the battle continues out on track right now.
And therefore, at the end of that lap, Antares Al heads to pit lane, having had lost 2 positions, maybe overheating his tyres. Good choice to have a bit of a reset, to sit there just for a couple of moments, kind of roll the shoulders, relax the wrists, take a sip of water. You don't have a long time stationary, but it's enough time just to breathe after a very, very intense lap.
Another Porsche off the road, or another car, I should say, off the road. It looked Porsche-ish briefly as we got a glimpse of it back on the road. However, there's quite a lot going on in this race as there whoops round the outside and off the road goes 38, which is Kevin Say. There was another car off the road there. It's recovered, but all of a sudden, people's sat-navs have packed up, Ben. There's a lot of people making errors and running off the road, and there's another spin. Is that Matthew Marsh? It is, and as he rejoins, he collects traffic and goes around. So Matthew Marsh has had a big, big drama at the corkscrew.
Yeah, and he's going to get a penalty for unsafe rejoin as well, for sure. That was clumsy. Very difficult to know exactly when to rejoin. You don't have the perception with a single screen like so many of these drivers will be running to see when cars are coming, especially at speed when you're parked up on the side of the road. But Matthew Marsh's race from the very beginning going so well is unravelling. 2 spins now. He's going to have damage, and he's gone to the pit lane.
So in he comes. Will he rejoin from there? We'll wait and see as number 10 goes through Alistair Young, running in 5th place, remember. Kang Ling is the man doing the chasing, and it is Freddie Ang whom Young is currently chasing. Turning now up through the approach towards the Rahal Straight, so out of turn 5, turn 6 sequence, there goes Young. Brilliant representation of the Laguna Seca circuit. This, as Matthew Marsh tumbles down the order now that he's in the pits. Evan Chen moves ahead of him on the corrected order, and another spin. That was 33 facing the wrong way, so the Porsche of Antares Au has gone around.
After his pit stop, running in the top 10, but it's all kind of unravelling for him now. We've had plenty of people visiting the pits as we're about halfway through the race, so I wonder if these guys want to divide the race into 2 and use the halfway point as their point for a breather. It does look like they're all struggling with tyres way more than we saw from our sim drivers. And now Tenaku Lei up the inside of a Mercedes is up for position. It is. In fact, it's the 2 Leis.
2 Leis O'Trek up towards the corkscrew. We've got a drive-through coming now for Matthew Marsh for his unsafe rejoin, as you predicted. So 2-1-3, Tenku Lei trying to gain ground, currently running in 13th place. 12th ahead of him in number 12 is Tenku Jan Lei. So the 2 of them, different teams running these cars. And it's going to be the BMW trying to make its move up on the inside. Bang! You could see that contact coming, couldn't you?
Well, yes, and so will the drivers. It's not as though they are completely unsighted. They will potentially have an audio warning that there's a car up the inside. Not all drivers have that, and it's certainly an add-on that you need to put onto this particular platform. But they do have a radar that will show where the other car is. That was a little naughty, although I felt like the BMW was out of braking power and running deep. But they have a radar. They can see exactly where cars in their close proximity are. and therefore, if you've got someone diving up the inside of you, there's no point turning in because you can see that there's a car there. You might as well just, if you want to try and run side by side and be clean, do it, but unnecessary contact.
We saw Alex Au gaining ground a little while ago, number 579. He's into 9th place overall, but he's now 2nd in the AM class. He's got 6 seconds to make up to Kevin Say and 28 and 3/4 minutes in which to do it. That, I feel, is going to be worth keeping an eye on. As here, Melvin Moe fights back and goes ahead of Kang Ling. Remember, Melvin Moe earlier on had a drive-through penalty, so he has got the pace. He's certainly got good car speed here, and he goes through up into 6th position, bearing in mind that none of our leading 11 have served their regulation pit stop yet.
Yeah, that's very impressive. 6th spot, still needs to pit. We haven't had very many pitters from the head of the field. So considering he's had that drive-through penalty, he's running in a really, really strong spot. Now 12 seconds back off Alistair Young ahead. You get the feeling, and let me just check the lap times, that he could easily catch Alistair Young and Freddie Ang that we saw with that entertaining battle early on between Honda and Lexus. And they all still have to do their pit stop. Melvin Moe's drive-through doesn't count as a pit stop. But ultimately, like we saw in Monza, he's running well.
Indeed so. So Melvin Moe with good pace, comes down through the corkscrew. What did he get out of the Monza race in the end? It was only 14th, but here, despite being up and down the order, it looks encouraging for him. The best of the stoppers, the BMW 213 of Tenku Ejenle, 6th in the championship he is, and in the AM class, Kevin Say's 6.2 second margin is down already to 5.4. So Alex Au is getting on with the programme, so to speak. 27 minutes are still on the clock. Matt Solomon remains the race leader. Division Pariachi in 2nd place, both ex-real world Formula 3 racers, as there Matthew Marsh comes up to have a go on the outside line of Antares Au. The Porsches falling down the order a little bit after their travails. They're 18th and 19th. And there, also trying to squeeze through on the inside line, is the Mercedes.
Interesting, though, that Matthew Marsh has taken his drive-through penalty. He's also done his pit stop. And he still looks to be one of the few drivers. I was just seeing how many cars are ahead that have pitted. Not so many, maybe 3 or 4 or 5. So still in a relatively strong position. Such again as a field spread and different talents that we've got in this. If you have a penalty, it is not completely game over.
And the AM battle is closing up all the time because Alex Au has got it from 6 to 5 to 3.1 seconds now. So we are set, I think, for a good fight between the two for the AM class lead. It's all further up the road there as you see Freddie Ang goes through, but it's 8th and 9th overall where the next battle is going to come from. Sean Thong in the Audi running 3rd. Freddie Ang here is in traffic, but he's in 4th place overall.
Yeah, and that's the other racing line that you can do through turn 1. Go deep into the brakes, go deep into the turn, and if you're not being challenged from behind, gives you a much straighter exit out of the turn and ultimately gives you a little bit more speed. You cover more distance, and there's always an argument to say which one's better, hugging the inside line and going slower. Certainly when you're racing in traffic, definitely the idea to do, but sometimes if you're on a clear lap and if you see kind of a Superpole-esque lap, you may see somebody diving quite deep into that first turn. So sometimes it looks like they're running deep and they've outbraked themselves. Sometimes it's simply a choice for the driver, but we are seeing such variance between the different lap times. I think mainly because of traffic, and Kevin C has been very slow the last 2 laps, as you've been mentioning, and has been gobbled up by Alex Au. But again, I think because he's been behind certain cars that are slower.
Possibly so. Another stop-go is coming for Andrew Harrianto. Further down, he's a AM class driver. He's been an AM in Super Trofeo as well as in GT racing. As up towards the timing line there goes Freddie Ang, still chipping away to try to catch Sean Thong as he goes through. And Matt Solomon's advantage, 4.6 seconds. It's interesting this, isn't it? Dervishan Padiachi just does not have an answer to him. The gap built early on as Padiachi had to get up through the traffic, and Solomon has been able to preserve it ever since. Another back marker goes wide. Freddie Ang easily goes through the traffic there, and 1.9 seconds adrift he is. Going through is 213 and 11th overall, which is Tenku Ijanlei.
Yeah, but he's just been passed by Evan Chen, so
yes.
The 68 is just ahead there in the Leighton House. He was the car that has done various drive-through. Oh gosh, he's now gone wide and let him pass quite easily. I was about to give him loads of praise. He's done a drive-through penalty for causing a collision. He's done his pit stop from the front of the grid, and I've actually just had a look at his profile, and his opening quote was. Once a wise man told me, "Do not give up when you get punted off at turn 1." And did he not do the punting at turn 1 this time?
I think he was the punter rather than the puntee, wasn't he? Yes, you're right. So the wise man didn't tell him what to do in that situation, clearly. But Evan Chen has got on with the job. He is actually, to be fair to Evan, a very, very competitive real-world racer. So it's no surprise that the speed is there. But racing in a GT3 Porsche, even if it's a virtual one, is relatively new. He was in Super Trofeo last year and did very, very well at Jerez at the World Finals. So Evan Chen battles on. The gap has suddenly gone up again in our AM battle, by the way. It was down to 2.3. It's up to 4.7 seconds now. So all of a sudden, Alex Hour's dropped away.
Yeah, slow lap last time, 26.7. Played at 24.0. So again, I think it's down to traffic trying to get past slower cars. You're seeing such a variance, as I said, in lap time. And you get all excited about a battle that's going to happen on the timing screens, and then the next lap it's a big gap simply because one has managed to get past traffic and the other did not. So difficult for our director to choose the battles because it can, in a matter of seconds,
Can all change, can't it? Incheon An you're looking at, he's dropped a long way back, 27th. This is the leader. This is Matt Solomon then, so the Hong Kong driver has got 22 more minutes. He's yet to make his pit stop. Now look on the graphic, you've got the position, the driver, the brand for whom they're driving, the car number, and then that one is pit stops to serve. When it goes green, as you will see for the car in 11th place, that means they've done it. So none of the leading 10 have served the regulation pit stop, and they're leaving it late here, 22 minutes on the clock. Matt Solomon in the Mercedes turns his way down through turns 1 and 2. The Andretti hairpin gets onto the power now, comes out the other side of that corner and makes the drop down the hill once again. So Matt Solomon with Dervish Padiachi in second spot. Third is Sean Tong. Fourth, Freddie Ang. You've got Alistair Young currently 5th, Melvin Moe is 6th, Kang Ling 7th, Kevin Say is 8th, still clear in the AM class over Alex Au. No, he's not anymore. James Russell is up into 9th. Alex Au drops back into 10th place. So Alex Au has had a moment somewhere. Meantime, Matt Solomon is still well clear in the lead of the race, 4.6 seconds over Dervish Padiachi. Matt Solomon, who has done a bit of racing in Australia, but began karting before he went to the Formula Masters China single-seater series. Now there, Alex Au pressing on behind in 10th overall. Now he's dropped out behind James Russell, as I said. His next target was going to be Kevin Say, but he's got to regroup and try and get himself back up ahead of the Honda here. Something like that is Alex Au. Here he goes. And field that 29. Matt Solomon 4.2 seconds to the good over Dervish Padiachi. Sean Tong looking for second and third place in a row here. So the cars accelerate down the hill once again. But right now, now is the man on the tail, or trying to get onto the tail of James Russell. The Honda being able to preserve this margin. It's only half a second as Alex Au closes up now, coming down towards turn 11. And as the cars come up over the timing line, Matt Solomon currently is the man in the of the race. 28 laps in the book.
Fantastic racing so far, David. Thoroughly enjoying the action. We've got Matt Solomon as our race leader. 28 laps on the books. 19 minutes and 53 seconds into the race remaining. Padiachi running in P2, 3.7 seconds away from the race lead, with Fong in third position, a further 1.6 seconds back. The action has been intense once again. Laguna Seca serving up a fantastic race, and David thoroughly enjoying all of the action that we've seen so far. So Solomon continues to remain in the lead. We're looking at Au now, currently in 10th position, fighting down into the corkscrew. He's got a couple of cars ahead of him. The blue flags are waving. Traffic has been something of a difficulty in this race so far. The drivers have got to be so careful not to be involved, get caught up in another person's race further down the running order. One of the many challenges of endurance racing. And David Au moves up to 9th position now as he's chasing down Russell ahead.
It's going well for him, isn't it? And the order is starting to shuffle, Paul, as we're getting one or two of them serving their pit stop. So Freddie Ang has pitted. Also, what's intriguing me is that the lead gap is coming down. We were saying it was round about the 4-second mark. It's down to 3, Solomon to Padiachi. So Dervishan Padiachi, the Australian-based driver, has not given up. There is Freddie Ang rejoining. He finds himself on the outside of Alex Au, who has yet to stop. So this is important for Ang. He's got to get through without losing time. Alex Au is fending him off as they make the run here up through turn 4 and then on to 5.
Fantastic stuff there. And again, just was saying a little bit earlier on, the danger as he came out into the traffic, there was a car trying to get out of the way to avoid being lapped, to help being lapped. And this is really difficult times for all the drivers, avoiding getting caught up in somebody else's problem. And Ang now is very much a man on a charge, 8th position now.
Indeed so, and he's the best, Paul, of those that have served their pit stops. So there's a chance he can gain further ground before the end. If he can get through traffic, his lap times would be better. That would stand him in good stead. But this is one of the problems that we discussed at the top of the show. If you make your pit stop and come out of the pits in traffic, suddenly you're stuck, you're slow, and it goes against you. So there is Freddie Ang ahead of the delayed Matthew Marsh, turning up towards the timing line. Matt Solomon's lead is coming down and down and down. 4 seconds, 3 seconds, it's now 2.6. So Padiachi is storming along behind Matt Solomon for the race leaders. There is Honda number 98. Freddie Ang in 8th place, coming through turns 1 and 2.
Yeah, and as you say, Ang stuck in this traffic, absolute disaster for him. Now managing to dive down the inside. I don't know if that's worked. Yes, it has, and no contact. So that's good news. He can now focus on getting away from the laundry house car behind.
So up towards turn 5 they will come. Matt Solomon, though, is the race leader, like I say, being caught by Dervishan Padiachi. Sean Tong is 3rd. It's Alistair Young in 4th place. And the leader is into the pit lane now. So Matt Solomon comes in. And this means that Padiachi should be able to inherit the race lead at the end of the lap. Yes, it does. Padiachi now takes over the advantage, Ben, but he's got to treat this like a qualifying session, hasn't he, to try and get a bit of time in hand for keeping the lead once he pits over Solomon.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to be about what you have in terms of traffic when they come out of the pits. We know that they're equal kind of on pace if they had clear track between the two of them, but the question remains, having pitted, where will he come out? Will he have traffic? How many laps on different parts of the track will they have to do before the reaction from the other driver? Traffic is going to be the key to winning or losing. We know that strategically you don't need to do anything in terms of change tyres or change fuel, so it is all going to be about traffic.
15 minutes and change on the clock here at Laguna Seca, round 2 of the GT World Challenge Asia Esports Championship, presented by Tarmac Works. It's a race now being led by Dervishan Padiachi. As you see, 66 Nan Lin with the Toro Racing Mercedes go through, but that is badly delayed in 31st place. In 24th, currently, Andrew Harrianto's Bentley. Experienced real-world racer is Andrew, and he is going in pursuit of Yuki Taniguchi's KCMG entered Nissan. So the order shuffling now that we have got these regulation pit stops being served. No window, you do them when you want. But this is an extra facet to this championship that we didn't have in the European. Matt Solomon then back out after the regulation stop then, and he is in 7th place. But look, he's found a few slower cars, relatively speaking, ahead of him, so he can't do totally clear laps right now.
Yeah, so let's keep an eye on those lap times then. At the moment, obviously, with the outlap, so difficult representation. But whilst Padiachi has clear track, that is where I would be staying. Interesting to know if these guys from, for instance, Craft Bamboo Racing haven't. I know that they've got engineers working with their real-world drivers to set the cars up and to make sure they're operating correctly. But they may also have spotters being able to watch this race, and there is a particular screen where you can see exactly where cars are on track, so they could be predicting where to come out onto track so that you don't come out in too much traffic. One thing that potentially smaller teams may not have. So it'd be interesting to see if a team such as Craft Bamboo, with so much facilities and engineers perhaps, that have not so much to do this year, because of course it's not just the drivers that aren't driving, it's the whole teams that don't have the operational need, and therefore those people who are on full contracts have been shifted over to the sim racing to try and get their representation as competitive as possible.
And that brains trust then going to work as for Laundry House. Evan Chen now ready to make a move to break into the top 10 against Tenku Ejinlei. The Tedco BMW just ahead of the Porsche. Evan Chen delayed early on. He has now, as Ben made the point a little while ago, done both his penalty pit stop and his regulation pit stop. Billy Lowe comes in. Padayachi getting away from Tong, 2.3 seconds. But has Padayachi been able to do quick enough lap times to be able to maintain an advantage over Matt Solomon when he comes out of the pit lane? That's going to be the real fascination in this. And the leading 5, Ben, running it late, aren't they? 13 minutes to go, and they've not yet pitted.
Yeah, exactly. Very similar to what we saw Filippo Bocchida do in the first race. And we were kind of questioning why you would choose to go so long. But interesting that even the guys who have been running at the head of the field throughout the race have chosen to do the same. Interesting also, I think, that Matt Solomon came out of the pits only about 2 seconds ahead of Freddie Ang. He should have had way more an advantage than that. And so Ang, remember, battling for 4th position with Alistair Young, has made up good ground on Solomon after the pit stops, and does then question where the rest of our top 5 will fall into line once they make their stops. Evan Chen here struggling to get past the BMW.
Yes, he is, isn't it? It's interesting this. We talk about how well the BOP works. You see that when a driver is in clear air, clear track space, able to push, able to bring down a gap, and then you find the car ahead of you, and where can you find a way past? Because in theory, the BOP should mean that over a lap, the cars equate. Porsche might be good at certain areas, the BMW elsewhere. So if it's a well-driven car that's ahead of you and it can defend properly and safely, getting past becomes very difficult indeed. Evan Chen tries to ride the curb a little bit. That gives him more momentum down towards turn 11. But of course, he gets a face full of BMW. Can he get the switch back? No, he can't. Good defensive driving this by Tenku Ejinlei ahead of him.
Yeah, and now the BMW has a Bentley ahead of him, so the traffic will be something that the two of them will be looking to play with. Every time I see traffic ahead of me, I think, well, how can I use this traffic to my advantage? How can I place my car and the car that I'm fighting with in a position to compromise them so that I can get past? Sometimes you can't get past another car because it's just too good in certain areas, as Padiachi now comes to pit lane. But this is a great opportunity for Evan Chen, that Bentley and the Porsche are ahead, both not running as fast as these two, and maybe he can get down the inside here. Oh, they're going to try and go 3 wide. That's not very sensible. Chen needs to be really careful here, and he's going to go around the outside the Porsche. No, Porsche stays on the inside line. Oh dear, oh, nearly contact, and now he's really boxed in because he's got the Bentley in front of him, and the BMW goes the inside. Contact!
Round goes Chen, Bentley goes wide, Evan Chen facing the wrong way to an extent. That was all a bit self-induced, wasn't it? But he has been off the racetrack, trying to rejoin. Look at Padayachi still in the pit lane. Will Matt Solomon go ahead of him? I don't think he has. Padayachi, Ben, looks like if he gets out cleanly, he will have kept the lead on the pit stops. We need now to go and find the number 45 Mercedes, don't we? Because we have had on the pit stops a significant development. It looks like Padayachi has just got out ahead.
It would make sense. There is Matt Solomon from 2nd position. Is Padiachi ahead? No, he's not. He's behind. Padiachi has come out in 3rd position behind Freddie Ang. So whatever Ang did, he did a fantastic stop. Maybe, I can't really explain it because Padiachi has not really had any issues throughout the race. It's just been a long stop for him. Perhaps he didn't attack the pit lane speed limits as much, but Solomon leads, Ang 2nd, Padiachi 3rd now.
Yeah, I think he made it looked like an okay stop that got him out ahead, but then that slower line through the first corner when he got to the next sector point dropped him back. So Padiachi there on his toes. and it is Freddie Ang then now taking the battle to Matt Solomon. Yes, so 1.6 seconds between the new top two. Freddie Ang was one of those that pitted early, wasn't he? So he's just been quietly getting on with the job while everybody else has been leaving it late.
And it's just simply being on a different part of the track to your rivals. So your rival might be coming up to traffic that you don't see because you are a 3/4 of a lap around in a different place. Kevin C, the leader of our AMs, I just saw in the background going into pit lane. He needs to look at the Lamborghini of Alex Au to see whether he can stay in that AM lead. He had full points from Monza, but I fear as though when he comes out of the pit lane, it could be pretty close for him to retain that lead with Au, Lei and Lowe running pretty fast.
Indeed so. Freddie Ang, regular in the Malaysian Super Series, although his early car racing goes back to 2011 when he drove in the JK Asia Racing Series, which was effectively by that stage Formula BMW, unofficial Formula BMW Asia. So he goes through now. There's the sister Honda, 898 is the car of James Russell. So 98 and 898, the Arrows Racing Hondas. One is 11th, the other one in terms of pit stoppers is second. Now, of course, Freddie Ang 1.4 seconds adrift of the race leader. What can he do to get on terms with Solomon? The 8th May, this is Evan Chen trying to get himself back up the order. It's been a really checkered race, hasn't it? He's been up and down the order race long here with penalties, incidents, and when he's in the right direction, good car speed.
Yeah, absolutely, but really kind of needed to be a bit more careful in that incident that we saw him getting caught up with. You could see it developing corner after corner. It was getting more and more chaotic, and for somebody who's got that pace, who knows that they can do it at the next corner, I would have just backed out and let the chaos occur as the Bentley goes round behind him. That Bentley is a lap down. Kevin C looks like he's come out of the pits at the head of the AM category, so he's managed to complete his pit stop and still has about 6 seconds advantage over Alex Au. 4 more cars to pit in 7 minutes of racing. That's only about 5 laps.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, Kevin say you're quite right. Keeps that position over Alex Au. But I'm looking at what's, if you like, the real gap for the lead coming down. Matt Solomon to Freddie Ang, 0.7 of a second. So it's come down from 1.6 to 0.8 to 0.7. Freddie Ang leaving nothing on the table as he gets through the traffic. Where up the road is the Mercedes as he comes then down the hill this time? In fact, Where has Matt Solomon gone?
Yeah, exactly. Matt Solomon's had a very slow lap. He's lost 9 seconds. I think what we saw there on board was Solomon recovering from a mistake. We saw him running slowly and didn't pick up that it was Solomon at the time. But Freddie Ang just sweeping around the outside easily, and Solomon must have got caught up in some traffic, I think. He's dropped behind Padiachi now, and would you believe it, Ang leads. Now, Ang and Alistair Young were fighting at the start of the race. Alistair Young is just exiting pit lane. We're watching Matt Solomon here, but Alistair Young could get himself in the pound seat as well.
Yes, you're not wrong, because those two have showed good speed all the way through. Freddie Ang from the second row of the grid, he actually out-qualified Matt Solomon and Division Padiachi, but he got a bit delayed in the first corner fracas, but he's made good since then. So now Freddie Ang leads from Division Padiachi, and then Alistair Young third. He's a 2.5 seconds back. So yes, Matt Solomon, whatever drama he had, has really cost him dear, because in real terms he's down in 4th. It says 7th on the graphic, I know, but the top 3, don't forget, have yet to serve their mandatory regulation stops. There's only 5 minutes in this race remaining, and Freddie Ang is doing a brilliant job in Honda.
Yeah, I think Sean Thong can get himself in the mix as well. Looking at how good Alistair Young's pit stop was, how he's put himself in real contention even with Padiachi. Can't believe Freddie Ang is leading this race. It just didn't look like it in the first stint that was possible, but he just timed that pit stop correctly and has been able to lap faster than everybody else whilst they've been tripping over traffic. I feel like Sean Thong can do it. Melvin Mo and Ling now, Kang Ling in the pits. They are quite a way back from Sean Thong, and therefore I expect them to come out the pits behind this gaggle. But look at the traffic that Matt Solomon is having to contend with. It's really, really tricky.
And the reason he's in it, in part, is because of that moment that he had. So right now, it is Sean Thong in the lead. but he's got to stop, so it could be a brief lead for Thong Bis as he goes down through that number 40. There is Matt Solomon trying to clear the traffic. Melvin Moe joins, and that's a place gain for Solomon then on the pit stops there. Melvin Moe drops back behind him, arguably where he should be, because Solomon was ahead early doors before he made his mistake. Tang Ling now pits and drops back into 8th place, so it's only Thong still to go. That's the leader off the road. Sean Thong is off the road, and I think, who was that getting involved with him? Was it Padayachi? Or was it Alistair Young?
I think maybe the director kind of insinuating that Padiachi, for the lead of the race there, got together. And I'm also trying to do the maths and thinking, hang on, Melvin Moe was 10 seconds behind Sean Thong before the pit stops. When Thong comes out of the pits, he could well lead this race as well, such as his pace been, depending on how long his stop is. So I don't feel like this is over yet at all. And we also know that Melvin Moe has great pace and can easily challenge Matt Solomon too.
Okay, so we're getting more penalties coming. Incheon An has got one for causing a collision with the Alex Au Lamborghini, but it's all unravelled for Freddie Ang, having just been praising him. He's trying to play catch-up now after off which could become 5th, depending on where Sean Thong will drop to after the next round of stops. In other words, the last pit stop of anybody. Sean Thong has got to make the last stop. Don't pronounce the H, do you? Sean Thong still to stop. Padayachi is the new race leader in real terms. Alistair Young 4.5 seconds back. Matt Solomon heading for the podium. Melvin Moe ahead of Freddie Ang, so he will be absolutely furious. But it may well be, Ben, that the story of the race doesn't the checkered flag here.
Yeah, I think some work to do for race control to monitor everything. And of course, in the real world, it's hard to make informed decisions about accidents. But in the virtual world, you can replay every single angle. Race control have got probably 15 different angles from each different car to monitor to really get a full picture of exactly what happened. Sean Thong now goes into pit lane. This is crucial to see where he comes out in comparison to David Padiachi, who leads. There was a 29-second gap before the stops. Look at the left of your screen. When that P disappears, he is exiting the pits. Here is Dominic. Here's Padiachi. Look to the right-hand side. Oh, I think there's Thong. Is that Thong going on along the pit lane now? I think it may be. So yes, Thong's not going to pick up the lead of the race, and in fact may even fall behind the top 5 drivers.
Well, he's certainly going to be lucky, I think, to hang on to a podium, which is just about where he was early doors. So he was third early. There he is rejoining. But where in relation to all of this is Melvin Moe, for example, and Matt Solomon? He's going to come out ahead of Solomon and Moe, isn't he? So that is going to put Thong in 3rd place. It'll be Padayachi from Alistair Young, from Thong, Solomon, Moe and Ang. But as Thong now has to get back up to speed, he's got Solomon and Moe not that far behind him. Look, it's about a length only between them for 3rd and 4th. There'll be one more lap to run at the end of this. So Sean Thong has got to make that car wider than it was ever intended to be.
This is going to be a fantastic battle for the final podium spot, and maybe even more depending on what penalties get handed out. Drive-through penalty to Alistair Young. And is that for skipping the track, or is that something that's come from Race Direction? We wait to see. I think Race Direction have handed out something to Alistair Young. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was Alistair Young, as you suggested, David, that had contact with Freddie Ang. They've been battling throughout the race and have been so fair with each other before, but maybe not on that most important of moments.
Well, I thought the pictures were suggesting that the Lexus had been there. As Thong goes off the road in the traffic, he's outbraked himself. Solomon is delayed. Melvin Moe, he's going to gain 2 places out of all of that. This is the battle for 3rd. On to the last lap. Melvin Moe goes up to 3rd. Solomon 4th. Down to 5th is Sean Thong. He tried to brake late in the traffic and just went straight off the racetrack. And it is a penalty for number 10, Young, for causing a collision with Freddie Ang at turn 7. Yes, what was puzzling me was how they got together, because, of course, it was Padayachi between them. So whenever it was that kicked off, Young was the kicker. And he's got this drive-through penalty for causing a collision with Freddie Ang. So right now it is Padayachi leading. Young will get a drive-through or a time penalty post-race. So Melvin Moe, who's just got himself up into 3rd, he's going to inherit 2nd. Solomon has got himself past Sean Thong, and that's not done yet. And look, Freddie Ang is closing. This could either be a great race to the end, or it could end in a big heat.
Oh, Sean
And
Thong's
it's
got
a
great
heap.
momentum.
Sean
It's
Tong
a
into the
heap.
back of Matt Solomon. Off they go. Tong into the barrier. Solomon facing the wrong way. More mayhem.
Oh, absolutely unnecessary. He had such great pace and just didn't even try to overtake. Just went straight into the tail of them and caused chaos. But here, again, out of the chaos comes Davidin Padiachi.
It's going to be 2 out of 2 then. He won at Monza, and again, Laguna Seca's checkered flag falls for Davidin Padiachi. 2 out of 2. And that was really by playing it safe. He didn't have the quickest car all afternoon. He's led far fewer laps than Matt Solomon and others, but he was there when it matters. Davidin Padiachi, his second win of the season. Now, second across the line is Alistair Young, but he's got this penalty that's going to be converted to 30 seconds, isn't it? So Melvin Moe will inherit second place, and third is going to be Freddie Ang. So a podium is justifiable reward, but little consolation for being nerfed out when he was in the lead of the race. It'll take rather a long time to unravel, so head towards the GT Asia Esports website post-race and you can read the full story of all of this and get the full result, because I think there's going to be a lot for race direction to have a look at. But the one thing that we can pretty much vouchsafe for is that Davidin Padiachi has taken the race win, and a really impressive drive yet again, keeping out of trouble and being able to take the points, not getting involved in any silliness, and Davidin Padiachi doing a very good job there, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. And a really close end to the AM battle as well. Kevin C taking full points for that, but he was pursued by Ao to the very, very end, just a couple of seconds separating them by the end. And we were watching Kang Ling and Evan Chen over the line as well. They were very, very close too. So to the very end, it's so entertaining. And I love the fact that Sean Tong left it to the end to make that pit stop, keeping that jeopardy up all the way to the line.
Yeah, it's still fascinating, isn't it, to see when people make these pit stops and the thinking that goes in behind. But real shame for Freddie Ang. It looked as though he nailed that race, but I'm still slightly intrigued as to how Alistair Young ended up with him, because it seemed to be Ang, Padiachi, and then Young as the top three. Anyway, the net result, it was contact, and the story, guys, will continue. Lots there, Paul, to reflect on after another hour of racing that absolutely flew by.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much, David and Ben. And what an incredible, a sensational end to that Pro-Am race of real drivers. I came upstairs to get in position to do the studio bits, and it had all changed. Fantastic stuff. And Ben Constanduros alongside me. Once again, our pro drivers certainly know how to serve up a spicy racing encounter.
And do you know what really spices it up is this pit stop that they all have to make. It just keeps you guessing all the way to the end. And some of the drivers, like Sean Tong, leaving it to the last lap. He did the same in Monza and the same here, meaning you don't actually know.